So, welcome to Sit and See. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. Research specialties are ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. And this class is about teaching people living in the real world how to train in meditation. I've been a Buddhist for about 21 years and training in Taoism for another 6. And the techniques that I teach are meant to help people who have jobs, children, real responsibilities, etc., how to train in meditation in the midst of all the difficulties and distractions of real life. So, if that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. Now, if you have questions about meditation or meditation practice, you're welcome to pop them into the chat and I will answer them promptly as I get prepared here for us to actually do some practice together. So, in this class, generally what we do is train in a bit of meditation while at the same time uh, answering questions about meditation. So, that's the purpose of this particular class. So, it looks like we have a couple of people here to get us started. I know I'm a little bit later than usual. Wouldn't surprise me if Hans pops in, since this is the time he usually pops in anyway. In any case, please do put your questions in the chat as they pop into your mind, and I'll do my best to answer them. Hey, Dave, welcome. Hey, welcome. Welcome, Antonio. Okay, well, since we're getting started a little bit late and there are no pressing questions in the chat, why don't we jump straight into Foundation 1? So, I'd like to give the teaching on Foundation 1 a little bit more succinctly, a little bit more crisp than usual. Uh, so, for those of you who have never done this practice or only done it in brief, this will be a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit more and do a few sessions of it all at the same time. So, Foundation 1 is a bit unusual because, unlike many of the other techniques that you may have heard of in terms of meditation, which are more of a gentle, soft, gradual approach, Foundation 1, intensive breath meditation, which I learned from one of my teachers, greatly accomplished practitioner of both Zen and Tibetan Buddhism, is meant to rapidly give you accomplishment of the first couple of stages of training in concentration, training in meditation. Yeah. And so this makes it a little bit different than some of the other techniques that are very effective in retreat, certainly, and tailored to that environment, but in real life, much more difficult to make work. Welcome, Jay. So Foundation 1 is is a technique that uses very forceful intention, a very firm hand, a very firm mind, rather than using gentle, sort of more non-interfering kind of mind. So, what is the justification for this? Well, in the Bhavana Krama commentarial tradition, starting in about the 8th century, the meditation manuals, even for people going into retreat, started to say things like, if you're just getting started on your retreat and you're trying to attain concentration for the first time, do 5-minute sessions, do very short sessions, and do several of them each day. In fact, they would say do 16, every hour, do one short session. And then as your ability to actually hold your mind on an object builds up, because you're applying great force, then you can start extending the sessions as you gain the actual capability of being able to hold your mind somewhere. And so, even for retreat, this technique was being recommended, but I find it to be highly, highly effective in real life. So, what is the technique? The technique, as some of you know, is deceptively simple. It's a breath practice, but you're applying incredibly powerful, strong, forceful intent, motivated by a very strong, powerful reason, if you can generate one, The more powerful the reason, the better. So, without getting into the reasoning aspect, let's just jump into the practical aspect. So, the way that this technique works is that, for example, you would breathe in naturally through the nose, breathe out naturally through the nose. And you're going to be trying to place your attention with great force on a small patch of skin in the nose. Why is this? The reason for this is concentration training involves a couple of different elements. One of those elements is that normally your mind spreads out its attention across the entire bandwidth of your five external senses and the content of your mind. And by choosing a small patch of skin in the tactile sphere of awareness and saying, I'm just going to be aware of this part right here, and that's it, you're learning how to pull all of the attention from everywhere else into a tiny space. So, training in concentration using a forceful method of pooling your awareness in a small space is important, which is why it's important to use the nostril, for example, instead of using lower abdominal breathing, which can also be very calming for your mind, but doesn't have this aspect of pooling your mind in a very small space. Yeah. Secondly, quite a few meditation manuals involve the visualization of something and using that visualization as a support for your meditation practice. That's involved to a very small degree in this practice, but the main effort in this practice is to hold it on the breath. Why? Because your breath is already there. And it's going to be whatever it happens to be at the time you're observing it. And so you don't have to worry about creating it and holding it and all the finer details of it and so forth because it's already there. You just need to point your mind at it and become aware of it. So, this is the reason why a small patch of skin in the nostril is the main focus of this practice. In the beginning, you're going to have two main problems. The first is it's going to be very difficult to get your mind to go where you wanted it to go. For most people, very difficult to get the mind to actually cool on the nostril. Let's say to get 60, 70, 80% of your mental bandwidth looking at the nostril and not looking at everything else. Very difficult. Lots of force is required if you want to do it quickly. The second problem is once you have pooled the bandwidth 80% into a small place, the next thing is your awareness wants to spread back out and go back out to your five senses, fill up the room, hear the sound over here, feel your sore ribs over here, whatever. Your mind wants to spread back out to all the stuff that it normally engages with. And of course, mental content is going to try to drag your mind off to do something completely unrelated to remaining on the breath. So because it's difficult to keep your mind in the activity with the degree of intensity that we're describing, we add one more element, which is counting. And it's important to know that counting is not a distraction from the practice. Counting is part of the practice. Counting is an extremely important part of the practice because it gives you more feedback. It gives you a barometer, a measuring stick that tells you how well is my mind staying on the activity. Because if I get to 7, but yesterday I could only get to 2, well, I've made progress, right? If I can get to 7 and then back down to 5, okay, that's better than 2 weeks ago when I could only get to 7. If I can go through 3 rounds of breathing and I only lose my attention once or twice and I can bring it back pretty quickly, that's much better. Now, if all you were doing is following your breath, you're not going to have very much sense of how well you have done actually at maintaining your attention on the breath. With the counting, you have much more feedback on whether or not the mind is staying on the activity. So, this is why the counting is important. In order for the counting to have the same quality of intensity, where you're bringing full attention to the counting in the same way you're bringing full attention to the nostril, the counting has to have force just like bringing the mind to the nostril has force. And I will get to the questions in the chat. after we do our sessions today. So you can put them in there and I'll get to them after. So once you have pooled the awareness to a degree on the nostril, when you count with force, right? So you're going to do two aspects. And if you're the type of person who cannot visualize at all, then just do verbal recitation of the number. But if you can visualize, it's just not very easy, then just keep working on it until it becomes easier. So in front of you at about arm's length, about the size of your thumb, you're going to visualize the numbers from 1 to 7 and then from 7 back down to 0. So you'll breathe in, breathe out, 1. Breathe in, breathe out, 2. Breathe in, breathe out, 3, and so on. You're going to count from 1 to 7, 7 back down to 0, but you don't count 0. You don't say 0 and so forth. You just take a moment at 0 to observe the body, observe the mind. If you need to make a small adjustment, you can. If you don't need to, then you just go back to counting 1 to 7, 7 to 0. And you do that for 3 rounds, 3 breaths, which should be about 5 minutes for most people. If you end up being able to do more than that, don't. Just set a timer and do 5 minutes. Okay? Okay. The reason for this, once again, high intensity, short duration. Extremely high intensity, short duration. So I breathe in, I breathe out, 1. I visualize the number 1. And then the number goes away, breathing in, breathing out, 2. Breathing in, breathing out, 3. In terms of so that's the number appearing, right? And then disappearing. In terms of how I say the number in my mind, I say it with great force. 1, 2, right? In my mind, I'm saying the numbers with great intensity, as if it's taking up all as much bandwidth as possible in terms of attention and force, right? So, like this, your quality of your attention on the nostril has great force. The quality of the attention on the number has great force. The quality of attention on verbally reciting the number has great force. Okay? And so we do this for about 5 minutes. I would recommend setting a timer that goes when it goes off. You don't want a timer that will startle you, so it should be something that's pleasant. If it's really unpleasant and startles you out of the meditation, that's not a good way to come out of your session. They do make timers that have like a really nice little meditation bell or something that can bring you out more gently. Okay, so let's give that a try. We'll do 2 or 3 sessions, depending on how things are going, and then I'll answer the questions that are in the chat. Okay? So bring your attention to the nostril. So breathe in and find a patch of skin on the nostril, in the nostril, near the nostril, where you feel the breath the most intensely. Okay, now that you found that patch of skin, as soon as I say begin, and if you were doing this at home later without guided instruction, as soon as you said begin, same thing, you should grab every bit of attention from your ears, from your eyes, from your nose, from your tongue, from the rest of your body, and cram it into this tiny space, this tiny patch of skin, until it seems like that patch of skin is the only thing in the entire universe that exists besides the counting. Okay? So find that patch of skin one more time. 3, 2, 1, begin. Take a short break. Just a couple of minutes. Don't do anything in particular with your mind. If you need to make adjustments to the body, you can. Okay, breathe in through the nostrils. Find the patch of skin. Great force, great intensity. Breathing, visualizing the numbers, counting the numbers in your mind. 3, 2, 1, begin. Okay. Take a short break. Okay. Place the mind in the nostril. 3, 2, 1. Begin. like this. If you'd like to do a few sessions back to back of intensive breath, the thing to do: 5 minutes, few minutes off, 5 minutes, few minutes off, 5 minutes. And then you can do 15, 20, 30 minutes of meditation like this. But it's important, as you noticed, especially doing a few sessions back to back, as Antonio put in the chat, you know, as you start getting a few cycles into this practice of 1 to 7, 7 to 0, your mind starts to get tired. It's hard to maintain the intensity of pulling everything in, because that's a muscle, a mental muscle that you don't work out very much. Your mind normally just spreads out. So to pull the mind in and pool it somewhere is a muscle that you have to work out. You have to build strength in this muscle. Yeah. Oh, addressing some of the questions in the chat. Yesterday, I meditated in the car while sitting. I just did body scan and then realized that I'm actually stretching my mind when focusing on different body parts. Stretching my mind. I'm not sure what you mean by stretching your mind. Quite often what I say in regards to body scanning is this. In the beginning, it'll seem like you're over here and you're looking, so to speak, mentally looking at this part over here. That makes sense? So it seems like I'm over here and I'm looking at my hand over there. That's how it seems. And that is by definition duality. Your mind seems to be in one place and your attention seems to be in another. So when your mind is like this, it's it's not fully focused on what it's doing, because it takes a certain amount of energy actually to divide your experience in that way. So eventually, as you gain more skill in concentration, what happens is that it seems like the center of your awareness moves to wherever the mind has moved. You're not separated anymore from a thing you're meditating upon. So that, I would say, is more like the correct insight. So if it seems like you're stretching your awareness from here to here and it's sort of divided between resting over here and looking over there, that's the beginning. And eventually the mind will move to wherever you have placed the mind. And that's a more mature body scanning practice. In the same way that some of you may have experienced, even doing this in a short period of time, right? You place your mind on the nostril, it may seem like your mind sort of moves forward and ends up here. Some people say, "Oh, it seemed like my mind almost moved out of my body." Well, yeah, because the center of your awareness moved like this to arrive at the nostril until it seemed like the center was here. Likewise, when your attention is able to move inside the body and land on the place you're observing, it'll seem like the mind is centered here instead of being centered here and looking over here. Okay. Oats Social Media asks, does it matter why that spreading out happens, or is it good for one to be cognizant of the fact that it will? Do you have any more to say about spreading out of attention? Yeah. Generally speaking, it doesn't matter why it spread it out. For the sake of this practice, it should stay where you put it and it should stay pooled. If it spreads out, that's a fault in the practice. And again, this is going to be a work in progress. You can think about it, as like a loading bar, like you're downloading something, or and in the case of my terrible streaming service tonight, buffering, right? It's like a loading screen, 10%, 20%, 30%. In the beginning, maybe all you can get there is 30%, and everything else is still there, but that 30% stays there. And you have a pretty good quality 1080p. And then later, after a few weeks, maybe, now it's 50% or 60%, and it's like 2K. And then after a while longer, maybe a few months after this, adding in some body scanning and so forth, and having this as your sort of your baseline practice. Okay, now maybe it's 4K, and it'll just keep getting more and more powerful as time goes on, as you're able to get more of your attention to pool and remain where you actually placed it. So Antonio says, I've integrated standing meditation for 10 minutes right after sitting, meditation for another 15, just trying the whole foundations out. Very good, Antonio. I'm glad to hear that. So it's important with the seated practice, as we did today, if you're going to do more than 5 minutes, put a break in between so that you're doing really high intensity, not long duration. Really high intensity, short duration. So 5 minutes, short break, 5 minutes, short break, 5 minutes, short break. And then you could do your standing, or 2 5-minute sessions with a short break in between, and then do your standing practice, or one session of intensive breath, then your standing practice. And in fact, if you look at the retreat that I did in a month or two ago for standing practices and walking practices, you can actually do your intensive breath in a standing position also. Once you know the posture and you know how to stand properly and it's not as distracting, you can do intensive breath while standing. So you can start 5 minutes standing and then do 10 minutes of body scanning in a standing position, for example. Okay. Antonio says, I realized that by the third cycle, up to 5, my mind started to wander somewhere else. I started to feel a loss of the intensity. It went downhill. Exactly. So the whole reason that you don't do more than 5 minutes is that probably your attention will go like this, and it'll sort of peak. So the intensity of the focus will bring the amount of concentration and pooling of awareness up relatively quickly, right? Instead of like the gentle techniques where it's sort of like this, and you need a long ramp, like the launch ramp is very gradual. This is very sharp. So is because of the high degree of intensity, you're bringing it up to here. Now, because of the high degree of intensity, lots of effort is required to hold it here, and it starts to degrade again. So, but you've legitimately created this degree of intensity instead of this degree. You see it? But it takes a lot of effort to hold it here because it's unstable. And so you want to get as much of this as you can and before it starts to degrade. And before it degrades too much, it's degrading a little bit. Maybe this is minute 4 and it's starting to degrade, and then you're stopping at minute 5 before it degrades. You take a break. Intensity again, bang, right up to here, holding it here as high as you can. It degrades a little bit. 5 minutes is over. You take another break, so that you're spending as much time as possible in this level of concentration instead of screwing around, on this very slow ramp of letting the mind calm down on its own. Not that that doesn't work. It does work, as I've said many times, but it takes a lot of time. This doesn't. So Cookie says, lost track of the numbers, started to wander off and just breathe. Still very relaxing, but shows me I need to practice on visual numbers. Yeah. So Cookie, one of the things that's really that this technique shows you really, really quickly is how. So there are two mental factors. It's called in Buddhist psychology. Two mental factors that are required for you to attain what's called samadhi or shamatha, actual concentration of the kind that is meditation, right? According to Buddhist psychology. to attain that, you need to have uh, you need to have two mental factors, and ideally, you develop them in a certain order. So the first one is called mindfulness, which everyone's heard of, except that term doesn't mean moment by moment non-judgmental awareness. That's not part of the definition at all. That's a modern definition, does not relate at all to the actual definition of the term. The term sati or smrti means memory, to remember or to not forget. So, what are you remembering and not forgetting? What you're remembering or not forgetting is a couple of things. As you said, you lost track of the numbers, right? So you sat down, great force, great intention. Here's this guy on the internet telling you, just try to count your breath, right? And you go, okay, I'll give it a go. With as much force as you can, you're like, you know what? I'm not going to forget to count my breath. And you get whatever, you know, to the number 6, and then you forget that you were supposed to be counting. You know what I mean? So this technique shows you really quickly that this mental factor of non-forgetfulness is really weak. And if it's really weak, then it can't hold your mind in the state that you intended to hold your mind in, because it can't remember what you intended to do. So the mind, you intended to hold the mind here and to count as you held the mind there. And then the mind forgot partway through the activity what it had intended to do. And since it forgot, then it started doing something other than what it intended to do when it got started. And so, like this, if you want to have the ability long term to decide, okay, I would like my mind to be in this state, I'd like to generate this particular internal condition, I'd like to enter a state of concentration with these qualities, et cetera, et cetera. If you can't remember what you intended to do after a few seconds, then you can't do that, right? So the first thing you need is this mental factor called memory, or remembrance, or non-forgetfulness, also translated mindfulness, but mindfulness is a really loaded term now. The other thing you need to do is remember the instructions, right? So the instructions were extremely high intensity on the breath. And so if you wander off into a gentle technique where now you're just sort of relaxing, you've lost that extremely high degree of intensity, which is important for pooling all of the attention in one place. So if you're relaxing before you have all of the qualities of a meditating mind, if you've already begun relaxing and you're not actively working to generate the qualities that are a meditating mind, then you're not generating those qualities, right? You're just having a break, which is fine. You know, sometimes you need a break. But if you want to generate the qualities of a meditating mind, in the beginning it's not relaxing. And this is one of the things that's very clear from the classics of Buddhist psychology. The beginning of meditation is not a very relaxing thing at all. It becomes relaxing when the mind stays still. I mean, humbly, you guys probably noticed that my mind seemed relatively still today in between sessions, right? And this comes not because I'm trying to relax. It comes because I've made my mind get comfortable staying where I've put my mind through more intensive kinds of practice. So the second mental factor you need is called introspection, or meta awareness, or vigilance, it's sometimes called. So this second mental factor, this second aspect of your meditating mind, is the one that is aware of what your mind is doing and what the quality of your mind is. So by way of analogy, if I'm holding this object, right? If I forget to hold the object, I drop it, right? If I start talking and I completely forget that I decided to hold this, I just drop it and it falls out of my hand, right? So remembering to hold the object is the first task. If I can't remember to hold it, then I drop it and the task is over. So not forgetting what you intended to do is the first task. Then, once you can hold the object with some stability, and this is easy, right? If it's still really hard and I'm like barely hanging on, then I can't observe exactly what I'm doing with my hand because I'm dropping the object all over the place, like like a one of those commercials from the 90s, right? So in order to be able to observe what is the quality of my hand, exactly what am I doing with my hand, exactly how am I holding the object, first I have to be able to hold the object fairly well. So the first thing you need to do is not forget to hold the object. The second thing is then exactly how and in what way am I holding the object? Am I holding it really tightly? Am I holding it really, really gently, barely hanging on to it? Am I holding it at an angle? Am I holding it upside down? Right? So, like this, mentally, once you can hold your mind on a particular activity, then you can start to observe the mind and go, okay, how am I holding it? Am I holding it firmly? Am I holding it gently? What's the effect when I hold it firmly and gently? Because this is important. If you want to be able to eventually relax some of the effort, you need to be able to notice exactly what happens as I relax the effort. As I relax some of the effort, does the object go nuts and do I lose the thing and do I start jumping? Okay, then I need to increase the effort and tighten my grip so that doesn't happen. Okay, if I start to loosen the grip and it stays where I put it, now I can relax a little bit and observe a little bit more. But now new problems will come up in the meditation, right? Once you can hold the mind where you wanted it, there are new problems, and you need more awareness of the mind, the thing that's doing the grabbing, by way of analogy. You need more awareness of this now in order to increase the quality of how you're holding the thing. Does that make sense? Before it was just grab it and don't let go, right? And now it's like, okay, I can hold it and I'm fairly comfortable holding it. Now, do I want to hold it like this or like this or like this? Or, what happens when I relax? How relaxed can I make my grip before it falls? Okay, that relaxed. So I have to hold it with just that much. Okay, that's not enough because now it's drooping. I need to tighten my grip just a tiny fraction. There it is. So that is the bare minimum effort that's required, right? To do that, first I had to be able to hold it. Is this making sense? So before I can gain introspection, to be introspectively aware of how I'm doing the action, I need to be able to not forget that I was doing the action in the first place. So if you relax the effort too soon, then you just don't even notice that you're dropping the object all over the place and the mind is spreading out and you have no clue what's going on. And, you know, are you asleep? Are you awake? Are you, exactly what is your mind doing? No idea. Because you're barely hanging on to the breath and the mind is spreading out and it's running around in your senses and you're imagining stuff and you don't even notice because you don't even know how to hold your mind in one place yet. And this is the problem. I know people. I genuinely hope this doesn't sound harsh. I hope, generally people don't think I'm being too mean. But I know people who have spent literally 10 years or 20 years, or in one case, 30 years doing gentle meditation practices who haven't made very much progress because they have never learned how to just hold their mind on the object. And therefore, they've never gained much insight into exactly what is the mind doing. Is it wavering and just about to let it go? Or is it becoming sleepy and dull and sort of, or is it holding it with a nice quality, not too firm, exactly in the position that I asked it to? What is the mind doing? They have no idea because they don't even notice when they're dropping the object because they've never developed force in being able to hang on to the object. So this is why in the first technique is so focused. It's not about relaxation. It's not about letting go. It's not about all of this other stuff. It's about working on that muscle of bring the attention in, stay where I put it. Bring it in, stay where I put it. We're going to do it a short time, so there's no excuses about the amount of effort. I'm going to put in 100% effort into those couple of things. And then because I've thought about this for a while and have the blessings of my teachers and so forth in this approach, um, baked into this technique are a couple of little details and things that will help if you stay on the path of meditation a long time. I think there's a little bit of lag. Hopefully, the buffering is not too bad. But if you stay on the path of meditation a long time, being able to do a little bit of visualization while mentally reciting something is a really powerful and useful skill. So, the way that I'm teaching you to count isn't just something that's, you know, like something you need to get over to be able to do this practice. Being able to visualize something and count, or not just count, but mentally recite and visualize something while the mind is focused on an activity is a really important skill set in terms of all of the components that are involved in practices that come not in my system, but in meditation systems in general that come much further down the line. Really advantageous to be able to place your mind somewhere and then visualize something while it's placed there and mentally recite something while visualizing and holding the mind in that place. That capability, that set of capabilities as one package, you find all over the place in advanced systems of meditation. So, right from the beginning, I'm teaching you basic technique that gives you this incredible sort of starting place for meditation, but also ties into the, you know, very nearly the end stage practices of some very advanced systems of meditation. Yeah. So, if there are no more questions, we'll call it a day. If there's one or two more questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I think that was a pretty good session. So, intensive breath meditation. No, no. Meditating in a gentle way can be fruitful, uh, but it's very slow in terms of development because it takes a long time to build up that skill of being able to hold the object. And then because your skill in holding the object takes so long, you gain very little insight on the thing that is doing the holding, your mind. And then in the way that I teach, if you go further down the road in the system that I teach, I then move on in Foundation 4 to Mahamudra style practice, which is a how to say it's a practice that's leading towards something like shikantaza, like just sitting style practice, less and less and less intention in the practice. And so my system starts with extremely high intensity and intent and works its way over to less and less intensity and more being, less doing, more being. Because it's important for you to gain an direct experience of what you are as an entity. And that doesn't come from just doing stuff. It comes from fully spreading your awareness out inside the things that make you up and then just resting in those or being in those until you know what they are. So that includes your five external senses and your consciousness. Yeah. So it's not a waste of time, especially if you've in the past, if you've done longer sessions, an hour or 2 hours or whatever, you have built up the heart, the character to be able to do more practice and to make progress. So no, none of it is a waste of time. And those previous experiences will benefit you a great deal because doing this, if you do my stuff, I tell people, somewhere between 3 and 5 years, if depending on how much you're doing, you can learn my stuff and learn exactly how to apply it all and where it fits in and whatever. It will make all of your other practices really work in real life, which is the point. So it's not like you throw them out. You keep doing them and you get better and better at doing them until they're like really doing stuff, you know? Okay. Sammy asks, is it okay to use a guided prompt for body scanning so that one can keep track of time while staying thorough within the body instead of dwelling on some areas versus others? Yeah, yeah. I don't discourage that. If you want to follow, for example, through the 5 Foundations course, which I hate to be a little bit commercially, but I teach all this for free, as many of you know. However, if you wanted to support me so that I can continue teaching it for free to everyone else, you could sign up for the 5 Foundations course, which is linked down below. And, or you could sign up for the 18 Lohan course, which has all the physical and energetic stuff baked into it, in addition to my stuff, which is dripped out over time in that course. Um, in any case, if you need a support that teaches you, okay, here's exactly how to say, here's exactly how you uh, go through the body, I highly recommend that, especially for the first couple of months, because the way that I'm teaching you to do body scanning is pretty specific, because I want to teach you how to become aware of not just the body in general, but in particular way of the particular ways the body's organized, and a few other things that become apparent when you just do body scanning the right way. So if you for example didn't know, let me scoot back a bit so you can see the torso. So if you weren't aware, again prefacing this by saying I'm not a doctor or anything, but my understanding is you have your lungs and your heart in a cavity that's basically up here inside the body, right? And so it's important, if you want to be able to be aware of later things that come from training yourself in tactile awareness that are way, 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 way later in the Buddhist systems, a little bit earlier in the Chinese medical cultivation systems and Shaolin systems like 18 Lohan Palm. But in any case, you need to become aware that, okay, this is my chest. And for example, if you want to be able to be aware of the energy centers in the chest, it's really beneficial to know this is my chest and I can feel it and I know where it is in space and I can get my awareness inside it a little bit, right? So one of the areas that we scan with my body scan is the barrel of the chest. Likewise, the uh, diaphragm belt, right? So within this belt here is your, what is this called? The spleen and the liver, right? So your diaphragm comes around like this, and your stomach, spleen, liver are all in this area. Then in the next one down, you have kidneys. I mean, some of your large intestine, I think, comes up over the top and stuff too. But most of your intestines are then sort of down here below the other two major organs, and then you have your bladder and so forth, right? So if you're doing more, oh, and then you have, of course, the pelvis. So if you're doing more advanced types of practice in terms of the later stages of Buddhist practice or the middling stages of Taoist practice and Chinese health arts and Qigong, Neigong, this sort of thing, it's really advantageous to be aware of the different cavities of the body and to be able to place your mind inside those cavities and know where they are and know how they're sort of stitched together. Very advantageous to have those skills. And so if you do body scanning in a certain way, you train your awareness to be aware of the different components making up the body in a specific way. instead of just sort of like, oh yeah, here's my arm and here's this and here's that. So this is part of why I teach it in that way. There are a few other reasons why I teach it that way, but I try not to, don't want to overwhelm anyone with a bunch of information. So having said all that, very beneficial to use the actual body scan technique that I teach. And I teach it at different lengths and different depths. I don't actually have a video of me teaching it at the most intense depth, but I have one on the school course. I can't remember which day it is. I don't know, like day 34 or something. I can't remember in terms of sit and see. But I have one where I'm teaching it at about 25 minutes for the body scan, and that's a good amount of time to do a 25-minute body scan. Is a pretty in detail one. But you could do one that was much longer, 90 minutes or so. In any case, yes, if you don't know how to scan through the body, it's good to use something to guide you until you get used to the pattern, and then you can do it without the guide. David Barnes says, I'm a drummer. I only see how forward I have gotten until I teach a new drummer simple. Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like that with everything. I was actually just talking with Neil, so I'm working with Neil Ripsky. For those of you who don't know, to do the 18 Lohan course, uh, and I was talking with him, and he just did a retreat with a bunch of people at his property in Canada, and he said that he was just reminded suddenly of how slowly people learn stuff. you know, it's just a very slow process to learn new things. So yeah, this is why I've tried to break down my system into really basic bite-size stuff that's actually quite profound. So foundation 1, pulling the mind in, keeping it there. Foundation 2, getting the mind in the body and in a particular way so that it's prepared for practices that come much later on, but also this calms the mind down a great deal. Also, you spend some time doing it in a standing position so you can start bringing your meditation practice into real life. Once you can do something, not scanning probably, but something like meditating on the 5 points or the 6 directions or full body as a meditation object, which if you hang around, you'll understand in due time, or you could join the school course and see the material. Or you could look it up on YouTube. I have the course available on YouTube as well. But so then you do it walking, because again, you need to learn how to take this stuff into your life, and walking is a nice bridge. And then you do Mahamudra practice. So you learn how to use your senses in their totality as objects of meditation, which is a skill you can take anywhere into all of your activities. In addition to this, as part of Mahamudra practice, you learn how to meditate on consciousness in a more or less sort of a just sitting style of meditation. And that style of meditation and being able to have that skill in a real way of being able to just rest in a state of non doing is a skill that's required, let's say. It's a strange thing to say in a way, that you need to have skill in being what you are without modifying it. But in a manner of speaking, you need to have skill in maintaining yourself in the natural condition and noticing when you're falling out of the natural condition and bringing the mind back to it, uh, in order to do a whole bunch of practices. If you want to do Taoist Neidan practice, this is at the far end of the sort of end stage most important elements of Taoist practice. It's at the end stages of Buddhist tantric practice. It's at the end stages, in my understanding, of things like Dzogchen practice, if you're already involved in those practices. Uh, there are versions of this practice in Hindu schools also. Where else do you find it? You find it in a lot of places, but um, of course, it's in Chan and Zen practices. Very, very important. It is amongst the most profound techniques there are. But I have found people basically can't do it. It's too hard. uh, okay, Antonio. I try not to share too many experiences in a general setting. I try to really save them for when I know it's going to make a big impact on one person and it's the right time and it's sort of organic and all of that. But let me think for a minute. I've told this story before, so I can tell it again. When I was learning Mahamudra with one of my main teachers, studied this technique for quite some time with one of my teachers. Um, I came to a point where it occurred to me that consciousness seems to be unchanging. It seems like consciousness is a ground that doesn't change and is prepared to reflect absolutely anything that appears without any mm, preference, I suppose, as to what happens to appear in consciousness. That's how it seemed to be. And being on the sort of a, as they say sometimes, being a prasangika gunslinger, being being a hardcore Madhyamaka guy, always interested in the emptiness side of the teachings of Buddhism. I was a bit confused by this experience. I was going, okay, so I'm looking at consciousness as best I can, humbly as I can, because I'm not a great being or anything, but and I'm having these experiences that indicate to me that consciousness is unchanging. That's really unusual considering that Buddhism says consciousness is changing, empty of inherent existence, et cetera, et cetera. And if it's unchanging, it's probably not empty of inherent existence because what would it need to depend upon if it doesn't change? And so I went to my teacher and I expressed all of this, and he said, "This is good. You know, first, those are valid experiences. Secondly, you will come to realize consciousness is changing, and he didn't say it at the time, but also by implication, not inherently existent, by analyzing consciousness. Because consciousness exists in a relationship with the objects that it knows, it's not, even though its qualities remain the same from moment to moment, the mind itself is not the same mind from moment to moment. By way of analogy, you could think of consciousness as being a bit like looking at laminar flow. So, laminar flow, for those of you who don't know, is when a liquid is flowing in such a way that this particle pulls this particle and they end up following almost exactly the same path. And because of this, the stream of liquid, which is moving at great speed, appears to be unmoving because the entire surface of the liquid appears like a solid, since every particle that's getting pulled through is pulling the previous particle into the same position it was in. In effect, the whole thing looks like it's unchanging, right? But if you touch a stream that has, here, I'll just put the term in here. If you touch something, I may be misspelling that, but if you touch a stream of liquid like oil, often has laminar flow, sometimes water has laminar flow. When you touch it, it splashes everywhere because it's moving at great speed. But when you just look at it visually, it appears to be unmoving, unchanging. Likewise, consciousness, if you don't sort of poke it, it appears to be unmoving, unchanging. But when you look more closely, it becomes clear that because consciousness is in relationship to other things, for example, uh, when I look at my phone, I'm aware of my phone. So the awareness of phone depends upon phone, right? If the phone goes out of existence, the awareness of phone also goes out of existence. So phone and awareness of phone are interdependently existent. And since these two come as a package, it can't be the case that consciousness is unchanging. Even though it has the same properties from moment to moment, it must be brought into existence by a previous moment of consciousness. It can't be an unchanging thing, despite how it looks. And this is a really important point in terms of the conversation between some Buddhist schools and some Advaita Vedanta schools, for example, because I would have to agree that consciousness looks to be Sat Chit Ananda. It looks to be being consciousness bliss. It looks to be an inherent unchanging entity that knows stuff and is blissful, or depending on how you want to translate it, sort of peaceful, right? Peaceful or with a blissful quality of some kind, right? I agree. That's how it looks. So the question isn't how does it look? The question is how does it actually exist? And it took me quite a while to sort out in a combination of experiences and study and analysis and analytical meditation to see, yes, even though consciousness appears this way, it doesn't exist that way because it's depending upon other factors to exist in the particular way that it exists in this moment. It depends on other factors that are changing. And this moment of consciousness can't be pulled apart from those other factors. And those other factors are changing. So this relationship can only exist if the consciousness is also a changing entity. Otherwise, it couldn't. They couldn't have a relationship like this. The awareness of the phone comes into existence. How could it come into existence if it was unchanging? Right? It would have to exist and be unchanging. And then how does it know the phone if it doesn't change? How does it become aware of the phone if it's an unchanging thing? The awareness should remain as it was, which was not aware of the phone. And yet there it is. Right? And so when you analyze with reason, which is part of Vipassana meditation, by the way, when you analyze with reason, then it becomes clear that, okay, yes, it appears like this. But even though it appears that way, that can't be how it exists, because if it existed that way, reality wouldn't function the way that it functions. Things wouldn't work the way they do work when you look at them in reality. So this was a pretty important experience. I can't, well, gosh, how long ago was this? I don't know, almost 10 years ago now, I suppose. It's hard to say exactly when. It's quite some time ago now. Yeah, that was a very, very important experience that has stuck with me for years, and I still think about. We were sitting in a graveyard at the time. We were sitting in a graveyard, and we were doing Mahamudra style practice. And I asked him, it seems like consciousness isn't changing. It has the same properties every moment. Every time I look at it, it's clear and it's knowing, and it doesn't seem like anything has changed about it. And so, yeah, it just gives a lot, in my mind, it gives a lot more credence to other meditative traditions on the one hand, where I'm going, well, yes, of course, if you went down this road and you became aware of consciousness, it should look like that at some point in your practice. Because that's what it looks like. It has the same properties every moment. Of course it looks that way. Of course it looks unchanging. But if you stop there, then according to most Buddhist traditions, besides maybe some very one like particular streams of sort of certain types of really advanced practice, or maybe they would disagree. Maybe if that's where you stop, then then you've left at least one thing not done in regards to understanding consciousness. You've come to see its conventional properties, but not its ontology, not how it exists. Yeah. And so then to see how it exists, interestingly, to kind of tie it back into all of the meditation stuff that I teach, we would go from foundation one, getting the mind under control a little bit, foundation two, body scanning, 5 points meditation, 6 directions meditation, full body meditation. So dealing with the body and tactile sensations, getting your mind into the body, making the mind extremely calm, establishing that calmness at the level of your nervous system and your physical being, which makes it much more stable than if you're just brute forcing it with your mind. Then, Mahamudra, gaining an awareness of the actual components making up your being directly, not conceptually. And then finally, rumination meditation, a precursor to, and some actually one teacher I was listening to very recently said not even a precursor to, but actual Vipassana practice if you can do it right, which is using a combination of direct observation, logic, reason to investigate the nature of things and to generate new understandings, new new uh new understandings and new internal states. So if you're trying to generate loving kindness, that's a rumination or a Vipassana style meditation if you're using analysis and observation in combination with concentration to generate a new internal state. You analyze, generate loving kindness, hold loving kindness if you have some concentration. Likewise, you generate an experience. Oh, here's what consciousness looks like. Is that true? Analyze. Oh, it doesn't exist that way. It's interdependent. It's changing. Hold that with concentration. Now we're starting to go from just analysis of a conventional kind into Vipassana because you have enough concentration to turn your analysis into something that's transforming your consciousness in a much more profound way, or transforming your awareness, your emotions, your attitudes, your understanding in a much more profound way. So like this is sort of the flow chart of training that I teach people. And then hopefully you can see, if you wanted to use that to become like a really incredible Eastern Orthodox practitioner or Taoist practitioner or Buddhist practitioner in whatever lineage you happen to be in, hopefully you can see how these tools would then tie in, because they'll give you the skills to take whatever lineage you're in and really do those practices well in a way that they're actually going to work. Okay. Okay, let's call it a day. Good questions today. Really good questions. I can tell you're all practicing. This is what makes me happier than anything. And I'm glad that we moved it to just 3 days a week because when we were doing it every day, there wasn't very many questions. And I think it was just because I was sort of here with you too much for you to be doing enough on your own to end up with new questions. And now I think some of you are doing more practices on your own and you're going, well, what about this? What about that? Why is this happening? You know? And it's good. The struggle that you're having to do the practices and the questions you're coming back with show me that you each of you who are asking questions are actually making progress in what you're doing. So it's good. Makes me happy. That's why I'm here. Okay. Well, I will see you either tomorrow or Thursday for open Q&A and Monday, Wednesday, Friday for this class. And like I said, if you feel compelled to support the ongoing effort to teach this stuff for free, please do chip in whatever you can, PayPal or Venmo. Makes a really big difference. Those donations do go a long way. So whatever you can chip in, please do, because that's the only way I'm able to do this full time. And if you want to support me on a more ongoing basis, jump into the 5 Foundations course or jump into the Lohan Palm course. That's the other. Oh, that link is not live, is it? Then you can jump into either of these courses, and that would. Oh, I still didn't do it. I'm terrible at this, as you can see. Oh, okay, yeah, there. Now it's live. Wonderful. Yeah, so you can jump into any of those, and that's a great way to support what we're doing here. And I'm also working hard. For those of you who don't know, working hard trying to get the next video out. It's going to be on the Kalama Sutta, which is not at all what people think it is. And I did a draft of it and just didn't like it and scrapped it and decided to do a ton more work on it before I put it out, which is why I've had a big delay in putting out something new. So yes, hopefully you'll appreciate that. For those of you who are interested in the Kalama Sutta and this idea of people have this idea that the Buddha was sort of like the ultimate skeptic, but that's not what that sutta means at all. And it's really important, I think, to clear this up in a lot of people's minds. Okay, all right, my friends, be well. I don't have my special cup today, so I will simply say, hope to see you again soon. Cheers.